live. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Friday's Live, the free Findmypast special Friday episode where we get to talk about all things family history and wind down into hopefully what will be a lovely, relaxing and rewarding weekend. My name is Ellie. I'm Senior Community Executive for Findmypast, which means I look after all things social media, community and video. It's really, really exciting, and it means I get to come and chat to you guys once in a while, I would say. I am one of 4 Fridays Live hosts. Hopefully you like the new little intro video that we've put in as well. If you didn't catch it, you can go back and watch it later. So yeah, I hope you've all had a fantastic week and that you've had a good day. I am back after a lovely week relaxing in France with my other half and my future in-laws, where I ate far too much cheese and I don't regret any of it at all because it was all delicious. But hey ho. Yes, please do say where you're tuning in from today, what the weather is like with you, what your week's been like. I want to hear from you today. We've already got some people joining us as well, which is absolutely lovely. I can see lots of familiar names, which I love. We've got Daphne with us. Hello. We've got Ross saying it's chilly. Do you know what? Actually, here in Edinburgh today, it's about 15 degrees. It's sunny. It's actually, I went out without a coat on earlier. It was glorious. And then I had my sister, who is down in London. She rang me over my lunch break and said that it was cold in London. I was just like, well, it's warm here in Edinburgh. Usually it's the other way around, you can see. So we've got Matthew with us as well. We've got Jenny. We have Wendy. We have Sally saying, I need a full day's after a full day's training, I need to relax with you guys. Yeah, I think a whole day of training, that's a lot because it's a lot that you have to sit and concentrate for. I struggle with things like that myself, actually. Niall is in the comments, so please do say hi to Niall as well. We've got Sue with us. We've got Sarah. We've got Ian from my very native North Wales. Peter, hello Peter. Apologies for the clicking of my mouse, by the way. It's having a little bit of it's not playing ball today. It keeps being very, very slow, and I've tried charging it, but yes, hey ho. We've got Karen, Rosemary, Ellen. We've got Pickles. We've got Jane, Gary, Gillian, Andrew, Janet, Judith, Linda, another Linda, Karen, Momo, Graham, Heather, Anya, Danny. Oh, there's so many of you here today. This is lovely. Yes, please do tell me how your week has been going. Yeah, it's really exciting actually. Lots going on at Findmypast this week, and yeah, there's lots to get through today. If you've not answered question of the week yet, I'll just pop it up here. So the question of the week is, that's not the question of the week at all. Let me just amend that because I swear I edited this earlier and it's clearly not saved. So excuse me while I just do some live improvising while I change the question of the week. There we go. What is your top tip for making family history research enjoyable? And there is a reason for why I've asked this today as well. So get your answers to that in. We're going to do some new records. We're going to do question of the week. And then the other two segments today, we're going to do a small segment on source criticism. It's not as boring as it sounds, I promise. And then we're also going to do a small segment on records that you may have missed or you've not tried yet, and why I think they are really, really cool and why you should consider them. Perhaps even if you don't immediately think that you'll find ancestors or relatives in them, it's still worth checking just to be sure, because these records are really detail rich, and I think most of them are exclusive to Findmypast as well, which is really exciting. Okie doke. So many of you here. This is lovely. We will kick off then. Let's do some new records. So in terms of what we've added this week, we have added some new records into the UK electoral registers and companies house records. It's mostly the data for 2021, so the last year just gone, but then you may also find some additional updates from other years. These are really fab, actually, if you are tracing living relatives or distant cousins, because you can normally see who lived in a household. But you do need to bear in mind with these that you're only going to see who was registered to vote. So if you didn't register to vote, you're not going to be in these records. Also, it's got to exclude anybody who has opted out of the public register. So people who want to register to vote, but they don't want their data publicly available. So you're not going to find me in these records because my name is just too unusual. There's not a single other person with my name on the planet. So I just prefer to opt out of the public register myself. I think it's a very, very much a personal choice. But yeah, these are really, really great records. They're also really good for house history as well, because you can add in, I think I grabbed a, yes, here we go. This is what the search form looks like. So you can add in the postcode prefix. You can also add in the year, and then the search results actually give you, you've got the name, the last name, the street these are on the search results. So these are actually free to view. You've got the other occupants also free to view, and then you've also got the year as well. Now, sometimes with the year is an estimate. It's not an exact year, so just bear that in mind. Okay, so those are the electoral registers. The next one we've added this week, which is really, really exciting actually, is the 1950 US Census image browse. This is entirely free to browse on Findmypast. Now, US law allows for census data to be released after 72 years. Unlike in the UK, it's 100 years. Also, you may notice that there's no tender process for census records in the US because they're public domain. There's no exclusivity period. They're just digitized by the National Archives and Records Administration, and then they're fair game to everybody. So many of you will have US ancestors to trace, which is fantastic. And I really, really hope you find them in here. Other people, like me, for example, I don't actually have any American ancestors. I do have American relations, so people who left the UK and settled in the States. So this is what I will be using the 1950 US Census image browse to do. Perhaps one of your relations married a US soldier during the Second World War and then left the UK and started a new life in the United States. That is entirely possible, and it's likely you're going to find them in here as well, which is really, really exciting. It'll be the first census they appear on since emigrating as well. You may even find what children that they've had, where they've actually settled, occupations. Really, really exciting actually. So definitely go and check these out. Now, what you'll normally find are names, relationships to the head of household, the age in years and months, the marital status, the place of birth, schooling or occupation, depending on the age, who they were living with, and the residence location, which includes the address. Now, because this is a browsable record set, not a searchable record set, you first need to narrow down the area. Now, in order to define the state and then the county, grab that first, and you can use the maps that we've got available as well. So you can find the correct enumeration code, because that is what's going to narrow down your search for you. So this is just an example of a map here. Now, what you do, let me just flick over slides just quickly. No, okay, I've missed a slide here, which is frustrating. But in any case, what you do on the search page is add in your state, add in your county, and then swap the image type to map. Then what you want to do is you want to open up some of these maps, and then that will help you identify the correct enumeration code. Then what you do is you go back into your search and you add in that enumeration code. So rather than you're just searching for one city, the enumeration code will help you just narrow it down even further. Then it's just going to be a case of flicking through the book, and you can hopefully find the family or the address that you're looking for. So I decided to have a look at the only overthrow family that I know of who left the UK and settled in the United States. The only family I've ever spotted over there. In 1940, they were living at 48 Main Street in Norwalk. I don't know. It'll be pronounced differently to how I think it's pronounced, I'm sure, in Fairfield. So I used the method, but sadly, when I went to find the address in question, they weren't actually at that address. So they must have moved by 1950. I just didn't quite have time to dig into that a little bit more before I went live today, but hey ho. Next on my list actually is trying to find some Welsh relatives from my dad's side. So my great-grandmother, Catherine Dobbs, who was born Catherine Walsh, she is from she was from what is now Northern Ireland. And sometime, I think in 1920 or 1930, she received a photograph of a woman in a graduation gown. I was hoping to add this photograph to the slides today, but I couldn't find the photograph. It's on my phone somewhere, but I just have too many photographs on there to find it. In any case, so they've got a photograph, and then on the back was written that it was from a chap called J. Walsh, who I assume was her brother, 113 Rhode Island Avenue, Northwest, Washington, District of Columbia. And I really want to try and find that particular address in a US Census record and hopefully find this exact family. And I really want to know if they're still actually living over there, if I've got relatives from my great-grandmother's brother who are now living over there. My auntie and uncle actually gave me this photo a while ago and asked me to try and figure it out, but it's been trickier than I thought, but never give up. Okay, so next up we have newspapers. So we do add, as with records, we add new newspapers to Findmypast every single week. They are a fab resource for so many things: family history, house history, fashion, sport, crime, whatever your cup of tea, you're going to find something in here. So there's 5 new titles this week. We've got the City Life Record, the Forest Hill and Sydenham. No, I'm pronouncing this wrong again. I'm terrible with place pronunciations, everybody. Sydenham Examiner, please don't judge me. The Insurance Opinion, the Managing Engineer, and the Vigilance Record. And then we've also got 3 updated titles: the Cheltenham News, the Edinburgh Evening News, and oh no, it's the same word again, the Sydenham, Forest Hill, and Penge Gazette. Please don't judge me, everybody, okay? It's been a long week. Perhaps the most interesting of the new additions this week is the Vigilance Record for 1916. So we've just got it for that 1 year at the moment, but I imagine we're going to be adding more to it. It's an interesting publication. It focused on crushing crime and indecency, particularly among women. I was reading through some of these pages earlier, and it just, I don't know whether to laugh or cry, basically. It liked to stage interventions for women they thought were at risk of falling into immorality and indecency. Thank you for that. Nobody asked for it, but thanks. So yeah, those are the new records. And this is just a little bit of a snippet from September 1916 that said there were extraordinary stories of women's degradation at the Swansea docks. And they were told to the Swansea Workhouse Visiting Committee, when a woman who had a baby in the house but refused to stay in the institution said she and the other women were paid £1 a night to go on board the vessels in the harbour. Oh, God forbid women making their own decisions, eh? Anywho, let's stop looking at the records now, and let me just catch up with what you guys are saying in the comments here. Okay. Karen's been looking at the UK electoral registers, and there's only 114 people with your surname below you. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Okay, I'm just going to scroll up and see what else you guys are chatting about here. So Karen says, my great-great-grandparents migrated to the US in the 1880s with all of their children except my great-grandfather. Wow, that's quite impressive. I'm going to avoid the question of the weeks for a moment because we'll come on to those in a moment. Roxanne saying a bunch of my family is out of Newark, New Jersey. Carol says, I like finding out the area my forebears lived in, who else lived in the town, village, farm standing, and what they did. It gets harder before the census records. I agree. I love a bit of fan research, and so does Jen, but I don't think Jen's here today unless she's, quietly watching and not commenting. But yes, we love a bit of fan research here at Findmypast. Okay, I'm scrolling. And so many lovely comments here. I just can't read them all. Graham saying there are a lot of Ellies. there are a lot of Ellies and there are a lot of Eleanors, but there aren't many. I don't think there is a single person in existence with my full name, my exact full name. Anya saying she opts out to yes. I mean, our ancestors are probably going to, our descendants are probably going to hate us for it. But yes, let's just think about the here and now for now. Okay, I think we should probably move on to question of the week because you guys are already coming in with some great tips. So let's move on to it. Excuse me. 1 moment. This is what happens when I talk too much. So we already had some good ones in. The reason I wanted to go with this question of the week is because I personally find family history research actually quite relaxing. When I'm doing it for work, as in researching, it's not for my family tree, it's for something to do with work. That doesn't feel like work to me. It's actually really enjoyable. And then if I'm doing it in my spare time and doing my own family tree, for example, that is a way I like to relax. But not everybody finds it relaxing, I think. And some people can actually find it quite stress-inducing. So what I was hoping for is if we could share our tips for how we can make it more enjoyable for people who may find it stressful, because I think family history should be quite good for things like our mental health. And I just hope that the tips that we come up with today will be of use to somebody. And perhaps if somebody's put family history to one side because they think, oh no, I can't do this at the moment because I find it too stressful, then maybe the tips will help and you can get back to researching your family history and it can actually be enjoyable for you and a way to relax like it is for so many of us. So that's the reason we're doing that today. So I had a couple in advance. So I had one from Kim and I have one from William, and William unfortunately is working, so hopefully he'll catch up with it later. And if you do catch up with it later, William, I'm going, hi William. So yeah. So Kim says, I like sharing stories of who and what you discover. Talking to direct family members or distant cousins can bring forth previously forgotten stories and memories. I enjoy finding things out about my ancestors' lives, things that aren't always recorded down on the forms. Yes, and I think we talk about this so often about the fact that family history is so much more than just names and dates on a family tree. It's the stories behind all of these names and dates, because names and dates don't really tell you anything. And it's taking the little bits from the different pieces of information that you have available to you about an ancestor or using fan research to actually build up that bigger picture. And that is just so rewarding. It's so rewarding. William says, yes, he also says he likes sharing stories with other people and taking part in fan research with other people. Usually someone hits a brick wall, but if you work with others and form your own fan network, this can really help. Plus, researching others close to your relatives can add exciting stories that appear. Lovely. So yeah, I think taking a step back and just remembering that these are real people that you are researching, people who came before you, and that they're not just names and dates. They will have had their own lives, their own experiences, their own challenges, their own relationships. Remembering that and then adding that as another facet to your research, I think that can be hugely rewarding and can make it more enjoyable. Okay, right. Let's have a look here. Okay, so Sue says, enjoy the rabbit holes. You never know what you will find. Absolutely. I think this is a great tip, because I often sort of admonish myself for falling down rabbit holes, particularly when I'm researching something for a social media post or something to talk about here on Fridays Live. I sometimes say, oh, I fell down a rabbit hole and I shouldn't have done. No, I think sometimes you just need to follow that instinct. And if you're enjoying it and if it's inspiring you to go and find out more, it's never wasted time, because even if you end up off your plan for the day, researching something you didn't expect, at the same time you are honing your family history research skills, no matter whether it was what you find is necessary for your research project or not. It's still time well spent. And did you enjoy it? Yes. Great, do more of it. I think that's great advice. Thank you. I'm going to take on board that advice and enjoy my trip down rabbit holes. Daphne says, watching Findmypast live. I'm so pleased to hear that helps make family history more enjoyable for you. It certainly makes it more enjoyable for me, that fact that we can all connect with each other on a weekly basis. So that's really, really good to hear, Daphne. Thank you. Sally says, get a large wine glass, a bottle of either red or nice chilled white, sit down, put the computer on and enjoy. Yes, absolutely. I think making sort of a nice atmosphere for yourself while you're researching, whether you grab your favorite coffee or there's a little treat in the form of a little slice of your favorite cake, or pouring a glass of wine and then you make a little sort of nook for yourself while you're researching, whether it's sort of feet up on the sofa or whether it's sitting at your desk and making sure you've got a lovely clean desk, nice and tidy, and or if it's not tidy, organized chaos. I find one of the two helps. Maybe a fresh bunch of flowers or something, maybe reorganizing your desk and maybe sitting in the window, or going to work somewhere new and sitting in like a cafe where you can people watch a bit as well. I think all of this really helps into making family history more enjoyable. I think there's no one set way to research, or no one set place to research. You do what works for you and what is relaxing to you. I'm rambling a lot here, but these are great tips, everybody. Matthew says, be prepared to be surprised and you will never know at the wonders you'll find. This is so true. I think sometimes we go into our family history research and sometimes we're trying to corroborate what we've already found, but there's always going to be spanners in the works. Anywho, there's always going to be things we don't expect. And that's great. That's part of the surprise element of family history. Even if, some things are exciting, some things are funny, some things are not so funny, some things can be quite upsetting. But I think as long as you're sort of mentally prepared to find these things, hopefully you will never be too surprised, if that makes sense. Deb says, be organized. Yeah, this is another great tip, especially if you're, for example, going to an archive or a library to do some research for the day, if you want to dig out some old records from there. Being organized in advance and having a bit of a plan of what you want to look at and calling up the records that you want from the particular archive. This is great advice, and it means you're going to have a really productive family history session as well. This is a great one from Anya. Find buddies. So happy to have a growing group of genealogy pals. Always good to pester them for a second pair of eyes or their opinion if something would be possible or not. Absolutely. Family history does not have to be a solitary activity. And I think all of us are testament to that. Sometimes it is just best to get another couple of pairs of eyes on things, because another opinion is really, really valid, and you might be interpreting something slightly different to how I might interpret it, for example. And then a discussion can be had on the best course of action, how to interpret that particular source, and perhaps even where to go next. Or if I've hit a bit of a brick wall and I don't know where I want to look next, and you ask your small posse of genealogy pals, and they say, have you tried this place? Have you tried that place? Why don't you give this a go? And immediately you've got another line of inquiry to follow. Great. Just checking the time. Yes, 4:25. Okay. Karen says, set yourself a research question and try using as many sources to solve the question. This is great. Not viewing sources in isolation and having that question as the forefront. So even if you wanted to have, I don't know, a Word document or a notepad where you write that question down at the top, you write down the sources you want to have a look at, and then you can analyze what you find, see if there are any similarities, any peculiarities, any conflicting evidence, and why that might be as well. Kim says, is finally killing off a troublesome ancestor enjoyable? I've managed that with a few. I think pruning your family tree is actually quite rewarding? Is that really bizarre to say? When you finally remove somebody that you think, do you know what, that person is, that's the wrong person, that's the wrong ancestor. So you just chop them off. And then you know in your mind that your family tree is now more accurate than it was 5 minutes ago. That's always a winner, in my opinion. It's that little sense of achievement. I think family history can be, I mean, I think a lot of us think of it as a bit of a puzzle. It's a mystery to be solved. It's a detective novel. And going through sort of like steps and stages of doing things, like knowing that, yes, okay, I've looked at the 1921 census for that family. Done. Achievement unlocked. Let's move on to the next thing. That in itself is really quite rewarding as a mentality. I love this from Ian. Shiraz, dark chocolate and good music in the background. I must admit, I have to have a little bit of music on as well. I tend to listen to music when I'm working anyway, or when I'm writing for something like that. But yes, with family history as well, I do like a little bit of music. I don't work very well with silence at all. I find it quite daunting. Oh no, my mouse is doing the thing where it doesn't want to work. Oh no, this could go badly. Okay, Paul says creating stories of your family from records and newspapers and photographs. Yeah, so again, it's not just finding the ancestor, putting them on your family tree, having the records. It's then sort of going back, and it's almost like building up a bit of a profile, or whether you were sort of, if you were going to write a biography about your ancestor, for example, it's consolidating everything that you found. And I suppose it's more easily digestible then as well. And you can read that, and then immediately that's a person's life that you have, and that you found this evidence, and you've told their story, 100, 200, 300 years after they've died, and they are remembered, and they might think they've been forgotten, but no, there's people like you and me, we remember these people, and we carry their stories forward. Okay, I'm scrolling. So many suggestions here, everybody. Matthew also says, ancestors came from all walks of life, so you may find all sorts of wonderful characters, their lives and their characters all led to you. Yeah, I think keeping this in mind is really sweet, actually, because I mean, we know our parents, we know our grandparents, most of us know our at one point maybe knew a great grandparent, but that's probably as far back as we've got. And yet there are all of these other people who came before us. And if they hadn't, I mean, this is falling into sort of counterfactual history, but if one ancestor hadn't gone to work for that place, or one ancestor hadn't migrated, you wouldn't be here today. And it's just weird that you've got all of these random events sort of crisscrossing, and then suddenly there's you. It's mind-boggling if you start to think about it. So let's actually just move on before I distract myself massively. Okay, if you get really stuck on a particular ancestor, leave that one and move on to a different branch of your tree. When you come back to look afresh at the ancestor you were stuck on, maybe weeks later, there may be new records and hints to enjoy looking through. This is a great bit of advice, because I think sometimes if you're when family history can get stressful is when you hit that brick wall, when you cannot move further back, where you run out of evidence that you found about your ancestor, where you cannot corroborate a source that you found in order to actually move forward. Take a step back from it, look at another branch and give that a go, because it takes away that stressful element of thinking, oh, I've hit a wall, oh, I've had to stop now. It's fine. You don't necessarily have to keep pushing through this brick wall, because let's be honest, brick walls are, they're quite solid. If you carry on pushing too hard, you're going to end up hurting yourself. I don't want anybody to hurt themselves. So take a step back and maybe just go along the wall, if this metaphor is spiraling out of control. But the other side, there may be a way to sort of move around the other side of the wall. I've lost the plot, everybody, but I think that's really, really good advice. And you're absolutely right. New records are being digitized all the time by Findmypast, by other family history resources, by archives, by libraries. There's volunteer transcribers doing fantastic work. There's always so much going on. And family history is only getting more and more exciting as well, because there's so much new stuff. Love that one. These are really, really fab, everybody. Really, really enjoying these. Ellen says, sharing them with someone who's as bonkers about your ancestors as you are. Yes, but also sharing them with people who are not bonkers about your ancestors. I sometimes find trying to get people who are not interested in family history interested in family history. I find that immensely rewarding. I'm awful. It's always, you can usually tell if you've caught their attention or not, because sometimes something just changes in their eyes and in their expression, and then you sometimes have to try different facts that you found. And sometimes, you're getting 2 or 3 facts in, you're thinking they're not buying this, they're not interested, and then suddenly you drop that little nugget, and then that changes and you've got their attention, and then to give them more stuff like that, and then you've got them hooked. I love it. More people for our genealogy family. Okay, I think that's, oh no, I've got one from Janet here. Sharing your research with others and family history societies, as you never know what might turn up, makes it all worthwhile. Yes, absolutely. This is another thing. Family history societies are great, and just get in touch with your local one, join one, because they're another brilliant community to not only share your passion for the past, but also share resources and tips and discoveries as well. Sarah says, sharing your discoveries with interested relatives, especially when they've been looking to. Yes, this is a common theme. Fantastic. I'm just seeing if I can find any more. Breaking down 30 or 40-year-old brick walls. Yes, that is so, so valuable. So when you've stepped away from the brick wall and you've sort of reassessed, and you've maybe tried to go around the brick wall, but then in one particular record that you'd never thought to try before, and it's probably even for a different branch, maybe you did a bit of fan research, you actually found a massive mallet. This is a metaphorical mallet. And then you were able to go smash, and then all through the rubble, yes, you've been able to continue your research. I'm going to stop with the metaphors now. I'm probably not going to stop with the metaphors now. Andrew says, look for people who did something out of the ordinary, wandered the world, committed a crime. They are always more interesting and have extra records. I really like this because, yes, okay, you may not want to know if your ancestor was some sort of criminal, but as Andrew says, they may appear in the newspapers, they may appear on the crime records, and then in these records, there might be other associates, family research, and what was the other one? Family research and neighbours. Goodness me. There might even be neighbours. You actually might find more names with the things like newspaper reports and crime records, because criminals did have associates, and they had victims, and they had people who prosecuted them, and they had witnesses, and all of that. So yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. Carol says, Northumberland and Durham Family History Society is really helpful. Only costs about £12 a year. I got in touch with some of the Scottish Family History Societies where my dad's family came from, and they had a lot of information I hadn't found. Amazing. Great advert for Family History Societies, everybody. This is a great piece of advice. So when you're searching, mix up common names with some uncommon ones. Finding people, this massively helps. And I completely agree with this, because I'm half a Jones and I'm half an Overthrow. Overthrow is a really, really uncommon name, which is great. Jones, not so much. But if you can find a more an uncommon name to throw into the mix, that can really, really help. And that also includes things like middle names. Middle names are absolute gold dust, because yeah, they can just really, really narrow down your search when you're dealing with more common names, and especially with middle names. If, like me, you've got in your family tree, specifically on my Scottish branches actually, where they take a maiden name of, say, the mother or the grandmother, and they add that in as the the middle name for a child, and then that helps you move further back. I just think it's fantastic. Okay, have I got them all? If anybody wants to answer, Victoria, apart from using Findmypast, how do people log their information to make their lives easier? Is there a program or software which is easy to use? Okay, so many more comments that I just have not got to yet. You guys are very chatty today, which is fantastic. And there's lots of people talking about desks and wine and rabbit holes. Oh goodness, there's so many more comments. I'm going to have to move on because otherwise I'm never going to have time to fit in what else I want to talk through today. But yes, let's round that off by saying, yes, Daphne has said there are some lovely tips, and I absolutely echo that. Family history can be enjoyable. It doesn't have to be stressful. And if you are finding it stressful, I urge you to have a read through some of the incredible bits of advice that have been provided by the community today, and see if you can just make it that little bit more relaxing and that little bit more enjoyable for yourself, because it is a fun hobby and it doesn't have to be stressful. I want everybody to be able to use it as a way to relax, as a way to switch off and do a bit of self-care, for example. Yes, Daphne, I am also distracted by the angry emoji. I'm not going to lie. I always am. Whenever an angry one pops up, I do think, how have I made somebody angry? But never mind, I'm a people pleaser, so I'm just going to move on. Okay, so what we're going to do next, everybody, is we are going to do a bit of an exercise in source criticism, okay? So you might remember a few weeks ago, I suggested we do a session on this, and I don't think I could actually get a whole session out of it because I think I would bore most of you to tears with a whole hour. So we'll just do it in a short 10 to 15 minute segment. So I have a master's degree in history, although it was some years ago that I got said master's degree. And I thought I might share some of the ways in which I would take a source and how I would interpret it before I then move forward and decide what I'm going to do with it, whether or not I use it for a particular argument or whether I discount it, whether I think I can trust it or not. And you know what? A lot of what I'm going to be sharing with you right now, you probably do anyway. I'm probably not going to be inventing the wheel with you guys. You probably do most of this, whether you do it consciously or consciously or subconsciously, not self-consciously, subconsciously. You probably do some sort of variation of this anyway. I think sometimes it's good to have, it's just good to have a sync on these things. And hopefully, you know, if there's somebody who doesn't do this, I'm hoping that I can help you make your family history research a little bit more watertight. So as I said, it's only going to be about 10 to 15 minutes. I do want to preface this by saying that when I was at university and I did my undergraduate and my postgraduate degrees, I was mainly focusing on older sources. So my forte at university was things like the medieval era, the Byzantine Empire. I did my master's dissertation on female crusade warriors and, you know, were there any? And what I had to do with this, because whenever I came across a source that mentioned a woman fighting in the Crusades, I would immediately get very excited. But then I would have to remember that I need to do my source criticism first. And there was a reason for this. So what I tended to find was a lot of the resources that mentioned female crusade warriors were actually, they weren't Christian sources, they were Muslim sources. And what I was worried about was, were the Muslim sources actually trying to undermine the Christian effort by saying, oh, the Christians have even got women fighting for them. So I had to sort of bear all of that in mind when I interpreted my evidence, and then how I took that forward into creating my argument. And I think a lot of this can also be used for family history. So this is the wee step by step that I would normally use. It might not work for everybody, nor might you need every step. And there may be other things that you like to think about as well. If there are other things that I've missed, please feel free to put them in the comments, because I think they might help me, they might help somebody else. So yeah, let's get into this then. Let me just pop my slides up. So this is my sort of go-to for source criticism. So you've come across a family history record and you may be itching to add it to your family tree. Every single bit of information. But it's probably important to first take a step back. And I know this is hard to do, particularly if it's a record that you have spent ages looking for. Or if you've come across a record and you think, that has broken my 10-year brick wall. Just hang fire a moment and let's make sure we're not misinterpreting something, or we're not coming across evidence that is probably a bit sketchy, for example. So the first thing I like to think about is, what sort of record is it? For example, I used to look a lot at laws. So Roman laws from the Roman Empire, for example. And one of my lecturers at university always used to say that laws are prescriptive, not descriptive. So that's an important thing to note, is what sort of record is it? Is it a newspaper? Is it a genealogical table, for example? When was it written? So the further back you go, the less evidence is going to survive. That's normally a rule of thumb. It's not always true. But like, for example, when I was looking at the Crusades, there's not a lot that survives, which is a real shame. So you often have to be quite careful with what you do find. Was the source written contemporarily or not? So what I mean by this is, was the source written at the time of the event, or was the source written later? And you can also use this for things like art as well. So whether a portrait of a monarch was painted at that time, or whether it was painted after the monarch died. So I think that is important, particularly, for example, if you're looking at, say you're looking at a newspaper article that talks about a crime that happened 50 years ago. That's not a contemporary source. So that is going to affect how you then interpret the evidence. What's the gap? Did the person who wrote the newspaper article, did they experience the crime that took place 50 years ago? Or are they hearing this from other people, from secondhand sources? All of this is really, really, really important. And I think quite a lot of the time with family history records, what we're dealing with are contemporary sources, but there are going to be other things we find, such as newspaper reports that may have been written weeks, months, years, even decades after the fact. Who wrote the source? This is a really, really key one for me. Would this particular person who wrote it, or several people who wrote it, would they have a bias? What's their angle, basically? And that leads nicely into the next point. Why do we have this source? How has it come to be in existence? Why was it written? Then, bearing all of that in mind, can you trust this source enough to add it to your family tree? Do you have to be a little bit selective, for example? For example, if you're looking at a census record and you see things like the address, that's probably correct. The occupation, I mean, they might have saw themselves as one occupation. For example, I can't think of a good example. A labourer, for example, but what they actually did more specific? Year of birth. People can sometimes forget. People can sometimes lie. That's something to bear in mind as well. Okay, let's now use a couple of family history records as an example. And I'm going to start with the more straightforward, and then I'm going to move into the slightly more complicated, just to spice things up a bit. So first of all, we're going to use this census record. So this is a 1911 census record for my great-grandfather Ralph and his family. So let's just say I've just come across this, okay? Really exciting. First time I've seen it. It's not the first time I've seen it. First time I've seen it, I immediately want to go add this to my family tree. No, stop. Let's not take it at face value. I know I'm really excited, but we don't want to start making loads of mistakes on the family tree or end up going down the wrong path, for example. Let's just take 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long you want to spend on it, and just take a look. So first of all, what type of record is it? This is an official census record from 1911. And we know that censuses were taken every 10 years by the government. When was it written? This was written in 1911. Great. Was it written contemporarily? Yes, this is actually contemporary to 1911, and it was actually captured on one particular day, which was Census Day. I can't remember exactly the date for 1911, but yes, fabulous. So we know it's contemporary. We know it's not 20 years down the line, and we know that things may probably haven't been forgotten. Who wrote it? Would they have a bias? So unlike with previous censuses, the 1911 Census of England and Wales and the 1921 Census of England and Wales, for that matter, were written by the head of the household in most cases. So we can see that my 2 times great-grandfather, Lewis, he filled this out and he signed it. Now, he was answering the questions that the government had set, following the instructions. So, for example, in 1911, the name of the employer wasn't asked for. There's nothing about schooling on something like US censuses. So sometimes it's good to bear in mind what isn't in the source, because then if you've made a note of what isn't there, what you can't confirm, you can then go and find that in other sources. Why was this written? So the census was issued by the government to capture population data, and the head of each household was required to fill it in. Bearing all of that in mind, can we trust this? Can I go ahead and add all of this to my family tree? Considering the head of the household had to declare when he or she signed it at the bottom, had to declare the information was correct, so to speak, yes, but I think we do need to remember with all of these sorts of sources, human error does occur. For example, I actually know that Lewis's son, the eldest son, Walter, he was actually born Walter Ernest Humphreys, but he's listed here as Walter Ernest Overthrow. He appears as Humphreys in earlier census records. A quick glance here would just tell me that he was just a son of Lewis and Elizabeth, but it's actually only later that he took the surname Overthrow. So he was either born to both parents before they married, or he had a different father. I actually haven't solved that yet, but if I had taken that to face value, I would have put Walter on my family tree, assumed he was Lewis's son, and that was that. Good thing I checked the other records, eh? So there's always going to be peculiarities and quirky things that a source doesn't tell you, which is why it's always important to never treat one source in isolation. Don't take that at face value. It can be really, really easy to, especially, as I said, if you've come across something and you've been looking for it for ages and you're really excited, just please, I beg you, just try and look at other resources to just confirm what you found. Or if you're quite happy that we've gone through this sort of checklist of source criticism and you've gone tick, 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 yet you think this is trustworthy, then great. At least you've taken a step back and you've tried to make that decision for yourself. Can you trust this source? And then you've gone, yes. Great. That one was quite straightforward. Let's try another. So we're going to look at a parish record. So what kind of record is this? It's a parish marriage. That's a tongue twister. A parish marriage record for Albert Sidney Overthrow and Lily Violet French. So this was written in 1931, which we can see from the document. Was it written contemporarily? Yes. Who wrote it and would they have a bias? So this was written by the officiating minister, and I cannot quite work out his surname. It's Alfred something, Alfred M something. I couldn't quite transcribe his surname. We can see that both parties have signed it rather than just making their mark. The witnesses have also signed it. So again, there could be some human error here. The officiant either is copying things down that he's received in, like a form, or he has just said, what's your occupation? Written it down. What's your surname? Written it down. So he's taking what the couple are saying at face value, or he might even mishear something. The guy could say, I can't think of an example now. I'm a baker, and the officiant might be slightly hard of hearing and write down a minor, for example. That could happen quite easily. I've seen it happen. So just bear that in mind with things like parish records. Also, maybe one party lied about their age a little bit. Maybe one party was barely of age to marry and just, cranked their age up a little bit. So again, cross-reference this. This sort of stuff is quite easy to cross-reference because you can go and find a birth record or a baptism record just to confirm the ages, for example. And then for things like occupations, you can go and check in things like census records. Why was it written? To solemnize the marriage of these two parties. Can we trust it? I would say this is pretty trustworthy, but it's definitely a good idea to check other sources. Were they both definitely 25 years old, for example, or did they just say they were both 25 just because it sounded cute? I don't know, I'm just making things up here and playing devil's advocate. Last one, I present to you an extraordinary newspaper report from the Morpeth Herald, but originally from the West Surrey Times, which is really important to say. When was this written? 1861. Was it contemporarily written? Yes, but it says last Thursday. So there's been a few days after the event. Who wrote it, and would they have a bias? So a journalist has written this for the West Surrey Times, which has been later printed in the Morpeth Herald. Why was this written? So it seems to be a news piece about some strange weather event that involved a huge torrent of water falling from the sky, not quite as rain, but so heavily that it made deep holes in the ground, entirely washed up a field of turnips, destroyed beehives, and on the day in question, not a single drop of rain fell in Godalming, Kingston, or London. Really, not a single drop. Okay, can we trust it? I think you will agree with me when I say that newspaper articles and reports in particular are great for family history, but they have to be taken with rather a large pinch of salt. Journalists and newspapers, they have newspapers to sell. They will always have some sort of bias. And in particular, if you go onto the British Newspaper for Archive, for example, and you pick out one newspaper and you come to the main page for the newspaper, there's always a bit of history there as to what the particular newspaper was. Was it a liberal newspaper? Was it a newspaper that was focused on the indecency of women and minors, like we looked at before? They're always going to have their own spin and their own bias, and that's really important to bear in mind. Because, an article about a woman who appears in prison for a spot of suspected prostitution, appears in court for something immoral, it's going to be reported differently in the vigilance record to how it would be in, say, a more liberal newspaper. That goes without saying, right? So they're going to embellish things. Can we really, really trust it? Did not a single drop of rain fall on that particular day? I don't know. These eyewitnesses, they're always going to say, oh yes, I was there, and it was remarkable, and it was an act of God. And eyewitnesses, I think, do tend to put their own bias on it, whether they intend to or not. It happens. I think we just need to accept that it can happen when you're looking at newspaper reports. So there we go. That's a spot of source criticism for you. Now, I did have one more thing I wanted to look at today. I was going to do some look at Catholic records, But I've just realised the time and it's 5 to 5 already. Can I just get a quick once over in the comments as to whether you would like to look at the Catholic records now, or whether you want to do that a different day and I can just go through your comments for the next 5 minutes? Can I just get a quick vote in the comments, Catholic records now or Catholic records another time? Let's have a quick vote. And while you vote, I'm going to drink more water. Let's see. And I'm going to scroll up in the comments and see what you guys are chatting about as well. It is 5 to 5. Yes, that's what I'm worried about. You know, you've got weekends to start, and I don't want to take up too much of your time today. Okay. Yes, I think yes, so the general consensus is Catholic records another time. Great. Okay, right. We will leave them for today then, and we will just natter a little bit more about source criticism while I have you. I'm just going to scroll up and see what you guys were nattering about, because you were very chatty about this, which I'm hoping is a good thing. So Matthew says, always check the original record. Just found a marriage record on Findmypast for 2 ancestors. The original record shows they were both widowed, but it's not on the transcript. Could have gone wrong if I didn't look. Yes, this is a great point. Not all of the information is going to be on the transcript. The transcript might be wrong. Shh, slightly. It does happen, okay? It does happen, you know, with millions of historical records. So yes, there we go. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit more. Helen says, my husband read our marriage certificate and refused to sign it as they had spelt his father's name incorrectly. So they had to void it and rewrite it. So exactly. So what if he'd left that, Helen? What if he hadn't refused to sign it and you'd signed it, and then 100 years down the line, your descendants are looking at it and they think that's how the father's name was spelt? Good on your hubby. That's all I'm going to say. I've noticed on some marriage registers that the minister has written down the name down with one spelling and the person signing it has signed their name with a different spelling. Exactly. And who are you more likely to trust? The minister or the person with the surname? I mean, I tend to go for the person with the surname, but then we do have to take in literacy as well. Grandfather's marriage was witnessed by his cousin, who was the child of Florence John's sister. I made contact with one of his descendants and Lotta Polseford. Great. Maybe one party who they thought was their father, who had made up a name for their father because they're illegitimate. People wrote down what they thought they heard, not what was said. Yes, this is very, very valid. And the example, I'm not sure if I've shared this with you before, but my other half, his surname is Ayton, and his line comes from Norfolk, like 300 years ago. And at one point, a particular minister noted the name Ayton down as 18, as in the number word 18. So for about 30 or 40 years, the entire family is recorded as 18. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm just scrolling up to see what else we've got here and read any more comments before we finish up. In any case, I hope that was useful. As I said, I might be telling some of you how to suck eggs here, but if I can help somebody out, I will be really, really thankful. Victoria says, I just want to say a big thank you to Findmypast for sharing the 1921 census. This week, I finally found out which railway company my great-grandfather worked for, I assume. I also unlocked another mystery of my grandfather's, the sister nobody knew about. But as a 5-year-old in the 1921 census, she was living in an asylum. Oh, goodness. I found a death record for her, aged 8, in the same area as the asylum. The record started out with great joy in the first line, but the last one made me cry, but spurred me to find more. I'll be sharing the news with my mother. Oh, I mean, I'm pleased you found it, and I'm pleased you finished her story, but obviously that's it's quite sad, actually. Anya says, you could have a newspaper who have a political bias, for example, think of fake news. Exactly. And I think if I can say anything about not necessarily things like census records and parish records, but particularly newspapers, they're always, whoever's writing it is always going to have their own agenda. And I don't mean that in a negative way. And I don't mean that in they don't always do it consciously. It just happens. It's just a fact. And I think that the quicker we can all accept that and apply that to our family history research, I think we can be making more sensible decisions in how we interpret any family history records we find. I hope that wasn't too serious for you today, everybody, but I really hope it's been useful. We're going to wrap up here. There's going to be next week, I'm going to be doing a session with one of our very own community members. I need to reach out to you, by the way, and just we can finish up planning it. But that's really exciting. So that's going to be happening on Wednesday. And then Jen is going to be back on Friday for Friday's Live. So please say goodbye to everybody else in the comments as well. Say goodbye to Niall. Thank you very much for doing comments for me today, Niall. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and we will catch you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.